Welcome to Beyond the Ivory Tower, an exploration of alt-act careers. I see that all of you are muted, which is excellent. This is being recorded and it will record the speaker view, so you're welcome to unmute during Q&A at the end if you'd like to, if you want to ask questions that way. If you want to ask questions through the chat, feel free to send a message through the chat and we'll make sure that that gets answered during the Q&A period at the end of the talk. So it's my pleasure today to introduce Kimberly Osborne. Kimberly Osborne is the director of the Center for Leadership and Development at the Defense League Institute Foreign Language Center in Monterey, California. Defense Language Institute Foreign Language Center in Monterey, California. A peer to the provost, she provides organizational analyses and guidance to senior leadership development and training for 1,600 faculty from 60 countries across 17 locations worldwide. Her career spans 5 continents and positions in Fortune 500 companies, nonprofit organizations, 2 top 25 public universities, including an endowed chair and leadership roles at 2 cabinet-level federal agencies and the National Science Foundation. She was a Fulbright scholar in Myanmar and also served in Kabul as the Chief Strategic Communication Advisor to the Afghan National Security Forces at the end of Operation Enduring Freedom. So welcome, Kimberly Osborne. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I am unmuted. Glad to hear it. I was here. NCA asked me to come and talk about alternative careers to academia. I've had quite a few of them, and my career has spanned many different facets, as you saw or as you heard. I'd like to tell you about some of the different opportunities beyond a traditional faculty role that you might consider with a PhD, and also give some thoughts and tips about how to access those roles. At the end, then we'll have, I'm thinking maybe 15 minutes of talking, 15, 20 minutes of talking, and then some time for Q&A afterward. And also let you know about some resources that you might pursue if you have additional questions or need more information. So to begin, once again, I run the Center for Leadership Development at the Defense Language Institute Foreign Language Center. We are the Army's foreign language school. It's the largest foreign language school in the world, and we mostly serve the National Security Agency. Our students are all military. There are very few civilians. Mostly they are spouses of the military personnel, and we teach people to understand and speak foreign languages so that they can serve our national security interests. So I have to tell you that I'm speaking in this conference on behalf of myself as a private citizen. I'm not representing the U.S. Army, the U.S. Department of Defense, or the U.S. government. Currently, as I said, I'm the director of the CLD at DLI. I also am an adjunct faculty member at the University of Georgia College of Education. I also have my own consulting and coaching business called Shine Path. And I've done a lot of things with that, including consulted with foreign governments and, the Fulbright. I did that as an individual person. So this is kind of a place where I can go in and provide things like advice and counsel outside of traditional roles that I have. I serve and have served on multiple boards of directors, including the National Association of Media Literacy Education. I'm currently on the local Red Cross chapter, and I also serve the discipline as an advisor and reviewer for organizations like NSF, Scholarly Press, etc. For the purposes of this presentation, you probably should know a little bit about where I've come from, so that I can establish some credibility that I do know what I'm talking about. In industry, I served in public relations roles on staffs, including as an advisor to C-suite executives in corporate and agency environments. And in academia, I've served in faculty and staff roles, including at the University of Georgia and Purdue University. And then, as the introducer said, in government, I've been mostly in communication roles, again, in public affairs for NSF, the U.S. Department of Transportation, heading up strategy for the Research Communications Division, and then also serving as an advisor to the Afghan National Security Forces in Kabul at the end of Operation Enduring Freedom. That was a NATO mission, and I was working for the U.S. Department of Defense, or U.S. Army in particular. That was pretty interesting, but that's not what we're talking about today. Today, we'll be talking about helping you find career possibilities outside of a traditional faculty role, searching and applying for those positions, and also talking a little bit about how to explain relevant experience. So first of all, I'd like to point out that we're not looking for a PhD role. You're a person, you're not a degree, you're not a student loan, you're not a title. So my advice is to find your why. First of all, you've got desires and ambitions. Figure out what they are. What do you want to do in the world, and what difference do you want to make? What will it say on your tombstone? You're not just looking for a PhD role. You're not just looking for an assistant professor or professor role or some alternative to that. I would say start instead, not with the role, but with the things that make you happy. What's your passion? What makes you get out of bed every day? What difference do you make to other people? And focus on that when you're looking for what job you want to be spending your days doing. And then once you have an idea of what kind of field it is in where your passion is, then establish your priorities for focus. Is it important to you to make a lot of money? Is it important to you that you have opportunities for advancement? Do you need to work in a place where people are really collegial? Do you need to work in a place where you can walk to work? Or do you want to work in a big city or a small town? How about the pace? That is one thing that I was surprised by in the course of my career. Moving from industry to academia was an incredible slowdown in the pace of work. And then moving from academia to government, again, a really big slowdown in the pace of work. So how busy do you want to be during your days? Do you want to be working in the evenings? Do you want to be on call or on demand? How important is it to have benefits? Working for the government, we still get pensions. That's still available to us. So if those kind of things are important, then consider what kind of environment you're choosing for things like that. Do you want to work for a particular company? Has it been your lifelong dream to go work for Microsoft, for example, or Amazon? Do you want to work in the big tech industry? Or do you want to be traveling, or do you have small children or pets so you can't travel? So these are things you also want to think about when you're looking for the position that you have, or the position that you want to have. One thing I'll tell you about a non-academic job search timeline is it's much faster than an academic timeline. Like we're applying now for academic jobs, and you might find out, maybe after the first of the year, maybe even later in the springtime. That's months from now. For some corporate jobs, you might find out in a matter of weeks, like 2 or 3 weeks. So if your first choice is to have an academic job, you probably don't want to be searching for non-academic jobs at this time. If you're ready to take whatever comes your way and kind of throw it to the fates, then, let's start looking now for non-academic jobs. The timelines vary. For instance, even among non-academic jobs, if you're looking for a job at some big bureaucratic organization like the United Nations, that's going to take a much longer time than at a corporation. And there are no guarantees. So even if you put your non-academic job search on hold because you want an academic job, you may still end up looking for a while because that non-academic job may not come through as quickly as you expect. So There is some bit of gambling that you have to do here. And I suppose that's true even when you're only looking for academic jobs, because we have our preferences for which institutions we want to work for. So it's a more juggling, but the same kind of juggling regarding timelines. Another thing to think about is whether you consider yourself an entrepreneur or whether you'd be happier working for someone. And an entrepreneur could be, you know, a consultant. It could be an inventor. It could be a researcher where you're working independently. You could go get your own grants, set up a small corporation or a large corporation or an LLC. And you could start your own company. Or would you rather go apply for a job where you're working for somebody else? There are pros and cons to both of them. If you're self-employed, then you're setting your own schedule. Sometimes that means you're working less than 8 hours a day, and sometimes that means you're working way more. But if you're pursuing an entrepreneurial path, you probably will want to find a mentor and probably an accelerator. There are, here in the Silicon Valley, I'm in the Central Coast of California, and we're just an hour south of San Jose. There are all kinds of entrepreneurial accelerators for people who are trying to launch new companies and have startups. Most universities have them as well. Purdue had it when I was there. I don't remember exactly what the office was called. And at Georgia, we had the Small Business Development Center in addition to the Office of Tech Transfer that would often help faculty to start companies. If you're in a university environment now, either as a student or as a faculty member, you may be able to take advantage of university resources to help you launch your entrepreneurial enterprise. If you want to go work for someone else, then you're going to embark on a job search. And that's mostly what I'm going to be talking about today. You'll look for jobs, you'll write your resume, you'll write your cover letter, and then go out and present yourself to people who are in a position to pay you to help them achieve what the company is trying to do for the organization if it's not a corporation. So the art of looking for jobs is way more than I could tell you in 15 minutes. So I'm going to give you some possibilities for places to look for jobs where people with PhDs might be happily employed. And then that's the, I guess that's on your side, the left-hand side of the screen. There are non-academic, non-faculty jobs in academia that you might be suited for, or other kinds of academic jobs that are not traditional researcher or teacher roles. Like at the University of Georgia, we used to have a lot, well, I think at Purdue as well, we had public service faculty. So that's another possibility. Of course, there are also staff roles. I was a staff person for part of my time at UGA when I had my PhD. It helped me to relate to the faculty members whose research I was promoting from the Office of Public Affairs. I told you a little bit about my government career in the federal government. Of course, there are similar agencies. It's at the state level, local level, tribal levels, all kinds of government structures where your work might be relevant. And what you would do is as diverse as the government itself. So all kinds of possibilities there. I have to say, I was talking to my students one time and they hadn't even realized that there were possibilities for things like a friend of mine who I was working with at the National Science Foundation was, the Office of Legislative and Public Affairs are the same office at NSF. And she had been working as a liaison to Congress. And she ultimately went and she was a science advisor to Senator Harry Reid as a communicator and someone with a PhD. Actually, her doctorate was in plant science. And my students were very surprised to learn that members of Congress have science advisors on their staff. But when you think about it, it completely makes sense because members of Congress come from the community. They're butchers and bakers and candlestick makers, and their levels of expertise is as varied as that. So they need advisors who are telling them how to interpret and vote on the bills and the policies that are coming to them. So they need someone to help and understand the science. They need someone to help understand the military bills that are coming forward, and they've got advisors for all kinds of things. So at the federal level and the state level, you know, you've got jobs in Congress as well as jobs in the executive branch, and probably even some jobs. I'm sure there are also jobs in the judicial branch. In industry, of course, this is working for corporations, for INGOs and NGOs. This is like the United Nations or the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe or the World Bank, organizations like that. I was a consultant for OSCE mission in Kosovo, where I helped teach media literacy and helped establish a national media literacy curriculum for their government in Kosovo. A lot of PhDs go work for think tanks as researchers. That's a possibility. And then, you know, of course, nonprofit organizations. Again, many, many roles. You may or may not be a researcher, but just because you have a PhD, it doesn't mean that you necessarily have or want to do research or have to do research. And then once you decide which sort of space you want to go in, then you can look at job boards or networking events or social media, job search sites, all these things related to the industry. So job boards for corporate jobs might be different than job boards for United Nations jobs. Social media, LinkedIn, you can search by title, you could search by company, you can search by connections you have if you want to make use of that networking feature in LinkedIn. I used to work for Kelly Services. They were the world's largest contingent staffing firm, and we used to place a lot of people into temporary and permanent jobs through Kelly Services. You could also use an executive recruiter, and they would place you into a permanent role. Now, often executive recruiters don't work for individuals, they work for corporations, but you can check their sites for jobs that might appeal to you. And I would advise you, don't look for PhD jobs. Focus on your desires and priorities, and then find a job that suits you. It's better to be more qualified than to be the least qualified person in the pool. So in the interest of time, I'm going to pick it up a little bit. You'll need a resume and a cover letter. Your resume doesn't have to change with each application. Modifications are good, and there are two basic formats for resumes, the chronological and a functional resume. They're formatted differently, and there are plenty of examples online for how to do that. Or you can hire someone and you pay them and they'll write it for you. Non-academic cover letters are usually 1 page long. Review the knowledge, skills, and so that should be KSE, knowledge, skills, and experiences in each job application. In your cover letter is usually 4 or 5 paragraphs. It would be an introduction, why you're a great fit for this job. So review the job you're applying for. Possibly write more why you're a great fit, depending on what they're asking for and what you have to offer. Have 1 paragraph about your education. It can say, I've got my degrees from this school, this school, this school, and these are my areas of expertise. And then thank them and invite them to give you a call if there's a good fit. You do not call them, do not follow them or email or call them for a traditional kind of job, except in very rare cases, but usually you don't. And then for your interview and cover letter, find a job, again, that fits you reasonably well and meets your priorities. This is mostly for, well, it's for either one, actually. Read the position description, and that's what you will speak to. You want to consider the audience, let them know that you are the best person for that job. You're not unlike an academic job talk where you're talking about your research no matter what. You want to speak specifically to a position description, and then meet them where they are. The way you would talk to the CEO of the company is different than the way that you would talk to your direct supervisor, unless your direct supervisor is the CEO. So consider them. You might start a conversation with someone like, how's it going today? And let them tell you, let them lead. Sometimes they'll take up all of their time talking about themselves. And then they don't get to know you very well, but it also keeps you from being on the spot the whole time. Channel your what you have to offer for the audience you have. So again, the CEO cares about the high level perspective, wants to know you've done your research about the company, and not so much necessarily about, can you run the copy machine? Focus on what you can do for them, not necessarily what you're looking for them to do for you, and make them believe that you're a rock star. So that means you kind of have to go in there with that mindset. Seek advice and network. You're doing this at the conference. At conferences, you can do that certainly. Look at seminars and webinars. Those are easy to access online, especially during COVID. Blogs, articles, and books. LinkedIn is a tremendous resource for job hunting. So I would say make very liberal use of that and all of the features that it offers. Ask friends and colleagues, and you might even consider hiring a coach or mentor. Like I said, I am connected in that community. I'm happy to connect you to people who could help you provide personalized one-on-one advice and point you to resources. So I'm going to share my contact information at the end. If you want some more follow-up, please reach out and let me know, and I'd be happy to do what I can to get you where you need to go. So here's my contact information. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I want to open up the floor for some questions and see what other information I can provide to help you. I think you can unmute yourselves if you have questions, or I don't think I do that. Does anyone have any thoughts?
Hi, Kimberly. This is Emily.
Hi, Emily.
Thank you very much for taking the time today to talk with us. I have a question about, so I love the idea of like finding your why and what do you think is important, but I think I have a gap between knowing what I'm passionate about and knowing what types of jobs connect to that passion. So I'm just curious if you have any ideas on sort of reining in sort of a broad passion. For instance, I'm really passionate about social justice. So yeah, I'm just not sure how that translates, sort of triangulating passion with our skills as PhDs, and then what jobs are out there.
Yeah, it gets a bit into the nitty gritty of where you're looking for the jobs. I mean, certainly you could go on to someplace like LinkedIn or Google and look for social justice jobs, and you're going to get, some amalgamation that their algorithm threw together for you, and maybe you'll get lucky. But if I were you, I would look into, start thinking about things like, do I want a job where I'm working with overseas organizations? Do I want a job where I'm working with nonprofit organizations? Am I looking like to go work for Save the Children or the, or Doctors Without Borders? Or am I looking for like the Red Cross? And then that will help you to, let me go back to this. That will help you to know which of these kinds of resources to go look at. There are also, you're probably going to be looking at these kinds of job boards. Like if you want something global, there's a great one called globaljobs.org. There's also DevEx, DEVEX. That's also got a lot of international jobs on it. There are some that are more focused domestically on nonprofit organizations, but I have some printed lists. If you contact me using the email, or that's probably best, I can share some more resources with you, because I'm guessing sitting here today, you're like, I've never heard of those resources. And I wouldn't be able to point to, every single area of specialty sitting here. So please reach out and I'll tell you what I know and help you find some others.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I will definitely follow up with you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Are there other questions? You guys all know what your passion is? Oh, you know what? That makes me think of another thing. When I was doing media relations for the University of Georgia, I would get calls from places like the New York Times, and they would say, you know, we want to talk to an expert about the decline of amphibians. And so I would call a herpetologist, and that herpetologist would tell me something like, I'm an expert in yellow-bellied tree frogs. I can't possibly talk about red-bellied tree frogs. And I would encourage you to please broaden your definition of your expertise, especially when you're looking at things like industry. The need for an expert in yellow-bellied tree frogs in industry is very, very, very narrow, if non-existent. So maybe you could talk about the environment, especially if you are looking for jobs in, you know, maybe like think tanks or industry, or however you want to define it. You know, your PhD has taught you that you know a lot about a little bit, but think maybe a little bit more broadly down that iceberg, that you probably know a lot about a lot more than a lot of people. So don't be shy about that. Having a PhD gives you a lot of knowledge about a lot of things that many, many, many people don't have, and they're who you're competing against for these jobs. So claim that rock star that you are.
Do you have recommendations of what kinds of jobs to look for people who maybe went into the PhD with the idea that they were going to be at a teaching university, and so they spent a lot of time building up teaching skills, but may not necessarily, you know, find that job given the current market? Like, what kinds of things, you know, the ability to transfer teaching skills into some kind of industry job, where would you look?
That's a great question. And that's in how you tell the story. So that's back here. And I would say, as a teacher, your business is my business, by the way. It's sense making. Anything that's got communication in it, anything that's got education in it, you could go work. You could go work for, you know, any kind of communicator job in any of these places. Teaching skills would definitely be applicable, because you're talking about, when you tell the story, you tell your story. Hey, I was trained as an educator, so I'm really expert at getting people to take information from one body, make it salient, relevant, and understandable to another body. Who do you know who does that? Pretty much everybody. So how are you going to tell that story to transfer those skills? It's a lot of the interviewing in non-academic jobs is how you tell the story. How are you going to package yourself? And this is where another person can help you, you know, pull out those things, a coach or mentor, a friend. You can learn a lot by reading books and stuff, but sometimes we're just so not good at seeing ourselves. So teaching skills are everything. Everything's teaching. Everything's teaching. You're trying to convince people of something. Go work in sales. Go work as a corporate executive. You think you're not, leadership development is all about transfer of knowledge. All kinds of things you could tell that story. Claim your rock star and tell that story. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
There was a request to share your contact information again. Do you think you could pull up that slide? Thank you.
Thank you for doing this session. I'm a fellow dog. I got my PhD from speech communication at UGA.
Oh, right, go dogs.
I know it. I have a question about websites. You mentioned a couple of resources, and my question is there a way to determine which of these websites is valid. Like some of the ones I might see that I don't know, and then I'm not sure if their job listings are valid. So I don't know if there's a way to determine that.
Sure. And there are many things that could point to that. I'm pulling on my media literacy background now. And I couldn't just tell you, you know, if it has this, but not this, then look there. I mean, some things you look at is, you know, does it have HTTPS for the secure website? We used to say, you know, is it .com or .something else, but now there are so many things. One thing that I do actually, and this came to mind, if it's an aggregator and it says, oh, Microsoft is hiring for a teacher, and you go, oh, that sounds like a really cool job. I'll go to the Microsoft site where I know it's Microsoft and then look at their jobs. Quite often you have to do that anyway to apply for it. You can't always apply through the site where it shows up. So then you know it's legitimate when you're looking on the organization's site for whatever it is. LinkedIn is pretty reliable. And then some of these other big websites, you know, like the UN has their own, the UN and NATO, they have their own job boards for all. usajobs.gov is where the federal government posts all of their jobs. So it's a bunch of jobs from a bunch of different organizations, but you know that one's legit because that's where the government goes. I would say do some research about media literacy and find out some of the things that they say about knowing whether a website is valid or not. And there are some big ones like Indeed.com, Dice. If you stick to those ones or some of these others that are specific to, you know, like DevX or Global Jobs, Tom Manitos and BradTraverse.com are ones for jobs in Washington. And if you find you're still being overwhelmed, please contact me and I'll help you find some ones in your specific area of interest.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I see that we have one more question in the chat, but this session is actually supposed to end at 2:30. So if it's possible to answer that question quickly, Dr. Osborne, maybe we could get through it, but it's about whether letters of recommendations from professors work for non-academic jobs.
They do, and you can sometimes submit them with your application, but that is a very small consideration in the package. I wouldn't go out of your way to get letters of recommendation, especially ones that are not tailored for that specific job. And I'm happy to talk more about that if you want to contact me directly.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Osborne, for this wonderful presentation. I certainly learned a lot, and I hope everyone else did too. So I guess a round of Zoom applause for a wonderful presentation. I hope everyone has a good rest of your day.